everybody, and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore, and this is our second or third take of the evening. It's been one of those weeks.
What's up, dude?
It's good. How are you, Scott?
I'm delightful. I'm super happy right now because every week we play the music, and every week I rock out and dance, and you look at me stoically.
I bob my head every week.
You bob your head, but this week I have two people enthusiastically rocking out with me,
Yes.
and I feel loved.
Backup dancers.
That's right.
No. If anything, I'm the backup dancer.
Right.
And you guys are the main event.
Oh.
We have two guests with us this week.
Tell us who they are.
Those voices that you hear. We have the honor of Senator Carri Hicks. Hello, Senator.
So excited to be here.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you. And then we have actress, film producer, activist extraordinaire.
Oh, yes, all that.
Cacky Poarch is here with us.
Hi there.
Totally above average.
So they say.
That's right. Cacky, for those of you who watch us regularly, you may remember Cacky from the election night show last November.
That's right.
Which was a super good time. You were a guest there.
Yes,
and we couldn't really talk then about what we're going to talk about later tonight, which is a movie that you have premiering.
Yes.
Here in
at
a
deadCenter.
week,
In
right?
a week from tonight.
I'm so pumped. I'm gonna try to win Scott some passes.
Great.
Because the streetcar is giving away passes, and I told
They
Scott
already got them.
there's one every day.
Oh.
Today's Thursday, then Friday, then Monday.
Okay.
I told Scott, I was like, I'm off on Friday. I'm going to ride the streetcar at lunchtime and just look for him at all the stops and see what I can find.
I've not ever actually been to deadCenter. It's one of my greatest. It's one of my greatest failings as a person.
Oh, it's the greatest. It really is. I
Yeah.
know I'm partial, but it is fantastic.
We went the last 2 years, and so now that's our Christmas present to ourselves.
Yes.
We just buy passes, and then we're like, that's all we'll do.
It's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
It's
really
a great
is.
deal, especially on Black Friday.
That's right.
Shall we? Because we've been podcasting without recording for like 45 minutes now. So should we get straight into it?
Yes, let's get to the news.
All right, we are actually, contrary to every other time we've done this, we're actually going to keep it short and sweet this week. We have two articles and then one announcement that will come as a surprise to no one. So first up this week, we've got a topic that really has two articles, one from Oklahoma Watch and one from the Oklahoman. The long-awaited opioid trial started this week on Tuesday here in Oklahoma.
I feel like they should call it the Opioid Chronicles.
Right, there you go. We actually have only one company now. So we started with several defendants. Some have settled. So Teva Pharmaceuticals, which is a company out of Israel, has settled for $85 million. Purdue Pharmaceuticals.
Doesn't seem like that much money.
Don't get me started.
I mean, if it was in my account, it'd be a lot of money.
Right.
But based on, what did we say their gross?
So this is the highlight of the piece here. So attorneys for the state say that it may take between 12.7 billion with a B and 17.5 billion over a 20 to 30 year period to abate Oklahoma's opioid problem. And they're asking the Cleveland County District Judge, Judge Thad Balkman, to order drug companies named in the lawsuit to pay for it. So we have a settlement for $270 from Purdue Pharmaceuticals, of which really, if we're going to call a spade, $12.5 million is actually going to abate the opioid problem. 60-ish of that went to attorney's fees, and the other $200 million went to
So we need 12 billion, and from this one settlement we got 12 million.
Yeah,
that's,
right. Well,
that's
we got
1/1000th of what we need.
Right. We got 270 from the settlement with Purdue, but 200 of it went to the new addiction center at OSU.
Yeah.
Then Teva Pharmaceuticals settled for $85 million, so that's 85 plus 12.5. I'm not great at the new math, but that seems a bit shy of 12.7 billion. So
something's missing.
Right. So it remains to be seen if I think from what I hear, people seem like it seems like Oklahoma and the legal team that's representing the state is doing a good job of making their case. So far, we've had opening statements and then evidence, and I don't know what all. I'm not a lawyer. Well, all the trial stuff started yesterday, and it seems like it's probably going reasonably well. I don't know. Johnson & Johnson is the main defendant at this point. I don't know if they have between 12.7 and 7.5 billion that we could get. I know that they have a lot. I do know that. So that is definitely a big deal to keep an eye on over these next few weeks. So check that out from Oklahoma Watch and the Oklahoman. Next up, there was a kerfuffle
Hang on.
today. Yes.
I just Googled how much money Johnson & Johnson cash on hand for the quarter ending March 31st. They have $15.336 billion.
Oh, so that's right in the middle.
What?
Okay.
Just cash on hand, like hanging out in the bank.
Okay. All right.
I have
$20.
Let me open my wallet. $5, $6, $7, $8, $9 cash on hand.
I have 3 IOUs.
Do you? That's right. You're just moths in your wallet. Yeah. Nice.
So
And this is a lot. I rarely have cash. So, can you imagine a wallet with just like $15 billion in it? It's just a couple of trucks driving around.
I'd be more than a couple of trucks.
Well, you know.
I would like a withdrawal. I would like to empty my account. I'd like $15.8 billion in ones,
Right.
please.
Nickels.
15.8 billion in singles. So that's the opioid trial.
That's an aside, but do you remember? So the guy that I think there's a single individual who was the largest Powerball jackpot winner of all time. He won like $900 million, and he blew it. And so there's all these stories. This is probably 15 years ago. I used to read Fark.com all the time, which is kind of a news aggregator. With
Fark?
Fark, F-A-R-K, with like a comedic slant. And there's all these stories about this guy. His name was, I think, Jack something. But he like, bought a Porsche, and then he like went to this strip club and left like $900,000 in his car in cash, and someone like stole his car and the cash, and like just things like that. So he was always like comedically losing tons of money. And I was like, this, what? Come on, man! Like, just it's. I'm
better.
I'm mad that you won, but like,
Put it
don't,
in the bank.
right?
Or
Invest. I don't know. Do something.
Why
be
would
best.
be best?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
even better. Just shoot for the aim for the stars.
Be best.
But if you're anyway, there's lots of things wrong with that story. We'll cover that another time. Back to the opioids.
Next up, so there was I don't know if you would call it a kerfuffle. There was a spat, maybe a discussion on the Twitter
On the
today.
tweeter today.
On the tweeter. So there is an article here from NonDoc that says those who took part in a hashtag poll on potential hashtag Maps4 projects largely do not want big ticket infrastructure projects for the next round of hashtag OKC investments. So this is a poll that was commissioned by former city council member Ed Shadid. It was done by Bill Shepard and the folks over at Sooner Poll, which is a well-known, reputable polling organization here in the state that polled a pool of likely voters asking how they would want to see any potential monies from a Maps 4 project spent. And this largely focuses on the key issue here is, do you want the money to go to large capital projects like Maps has done in the past, so building arenas and streetcars and things of that nature, or do you think that the money should go to maintenance and operations of existing city infrastructure? It's kind of the core issue.
Right. Like, yeah, maps for neighborhoods and sidewalks and that kind of stuff,
etc.
which is more how the maps
protected bike
thing
lane
started, right? Like with maps for schools.
Yeah,
or kids.
Well, Maps for Kids was the second one. So the first Maps was Bricktown, right? And then the second Maps was
Yes.
Maps.
Right.
It was
Maps for Kids.
it was the Riverwalk, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's
Maps
right.
First.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
So there was a discussion about whether or not this poll was done in the most rigorous way possible.
Steve Lackmeyer really fired off a shot across the bow.
Yes.
Yes,
First.
indeed.
And like everyone got their haunches up pretty quick.
Yeah. So you can go find it's all public, right? You can go find the discussion on Twitter. The poll. I will say I have not read the poll in its entirety. It's 70 pages, but I have read the sampling and the sampling and the questions, and it is interesting to me. And I'm not a statistician, right? But we talk about polls and data a lot because we're
Good
both,
use of polling
we're
or bad
super
use of polling? Nerds.
TM.
It's not trademarked.
Not trademarked?
That's
No?
just what 538 does.
All right.
We can co-opt it for our purposes.
So
For our 7 listeners.
the question, so Steve, who is you may or may not know, writes largely about Oklahoma City issues for the Oklahoman. He kind of asked the question, like, was the poll done as rigorously it could be, or like were the questions framed appropriately?
He felt like the pollsters' personal views color all of his polls, and several people came to his defense, to Shepard's defense, saying he separates his politics from his polling.
Yeah, and I don't know Bill Shepard, and I don't know what his politics are. I don't know him like personally, and so I can't comment on that. I will say I did find for me reading the poll.
Yes.
I felt like some of the questions were, and maybe leading is not the right word. Like I was just kind of like scrolling back through the poll, and one of the questions, this is the fifth question, it says currently Oklahoma is the only state in the U.S. in which cities are not allowed to use property tax for its general fund, which makes the city particularly dependent on sales tax to fund city operations like police, fire, parks, transit, and code enforcement. And then the question is, knowing this, do you support or oppose decreasing the size of maps from a full penny in order to spend a portion of the penny on the operations of city departments? And so I guess the question that I would have, and I have not made like an academic study of how you do these kind of polls, but is it appropriate to like kind of try and educate the population that you're polling before you ask the question? Right? Mm-hmm. Like, to me, what this is saying is like, just so you know, Oklahoma is an outlier in this thing that it does. Mm-hmm. So knowing that they're an outlier, do you think they should do it differently? As opposed to just asking the question, this is what Oklahoma does. Do you think that's good or do you think that's bad?
I'm going to respond real quick, and then I want Senator Hicks to chime in because she actually got polled on this.
I did.
And so I want to hear what a polling, not victim,
Respondent.
Pollee. Yes. So I say, yes, that's totally appropriate to ask it that way because you want an informed opinion, right? And if you're just asking people willy-nilly, they're going to give you an answer, but it doesn't mean that they really have the context to answer as correctly, as fully informed as they could. So you get a lower quality response.
Counterpoint.
I don't care what you think, but please share.
Hypothetically, currently, Michael Pence and Pete Buttigieg are running for president of the United States. Mike Pence has previously served as vice president of the United States. Pete Buttigieg has been mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Knowing this, who do you think is more qualified to be president of the United States?
Well, that presents some information. First of all, that is a fictitious situation at this juncture.
And it's hyperbolic, but
right.
You see the issue, right?
Well, yes, but that only paints... That gives one tidbit of the information, and
this only gives one tidbit.
Yes, but I think this one tidbit is more descriptive of the situation than that. In your example,
I mean, maybe, but I think
your point.
I think
not well taken.
Because I think that there are people, and again, I'm not like chastising the poll, and I'm not taking up for the poll. I'm just saying like, I think that's a reasonable question to ask because you could make the counterpoint. Yeah. So Oklahoma is the only state that does it this way. To me, that begs the question,
why?
Not should we do it differently, but why do we do it the way we do it?
You're analytical in a different way, Scott. Senator Hicks.
I'm special.
How did you feel while you were being polled?
I completely missed all of, I guess, like the premise. Yeah, and maybe it was just because, I mean, it was information that I already knew. And I mean, obviously it was relevant, I felt like, to the questions that they were asking. They asked multiple times, if this changed my perspective about how I would vote or if I would be more likely to vote for the Maps 4 project. And I mean, I'm sure, I don't recall the exact votes, so to speak, on the poll, but I mean, ultimately, I think what you would see is it didn't dissuade me, didn't change my opinion, but ultimately, I mean, I'm a big proponent of investing in our communities because I know how costly things are, and I guess my big takeaway from the poll was, I was actually very excited to hear more of a conversation around investing in mental health services, and really investing in our people as a city, and making sure that, as you alluded to earlier, walkability, that, we're really looking at some of the fundamental issues that we have. I mean, obviously we know that we are high on the obesity rate. And so is that directly reflective of the fact that we're not a walking city? Probably. So, I think my takeaway from the poll was not necessarily that I felt like I was being led down a trail. It was probably one that I would already walk anyways. But it was information that I felt like was relevant to the questions that they were asking.
Sure. I think that's totally fair. And I mean, and I, for the record, I agree with you. Like you know what I mean? Like I think that I mean, like for me, as I think about like maps and like if we approve of maps for like what would I like to, I'd love again like walkability and protected bike lanes and investing in infrastructure. Like I don't know that like I don't really see a need for us to have like a giant new stadium. You know what I mean? Like I would love it if we changed some things about the streetcar, to be honest, but I don't know that there's going to be enough money in the maps for to do that, and I don't know that it should be the highest priority like right now. So on like the merits, I 100% agree. I just thought it was an interesting, like, just kind of, you know what I mean? Like, just an interesting, like, I would be curious to know, like, from, like, a, like...
You want an academic?
I did not say that. I did
because Keith Gaddy did weigh in.
He did. And now, did he ever comment on like this poll specifically? I know he vouched for Bill Shepard's integrity as a person.
I think he got tagged in the tweet thread and was like, "What fight am I being brought to right now?
Right.
Give me what's up? Someone hand me an axe. What's happening?
Yeah.
Because we fight with axes these days.
Right. But anyway, so
it's more humane.
Check out the article on NonDoc, but even more importantly, read the poll and see what you think. And if you really want to get into this, get on Twitter and yeah.
Except for those of you who don't live in Oklahoma City, although I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
I'd love to hear. I don't know what Tulsans think about our maps deal. They don't have a maps equivalent up there, do they?
Not that I know of. No.
We need to get Dewey Bartlett, or not Dewey Bartlett. Well, that'd be cool too. But GT Bynum, we need to get the mayor up there on the old mayor, the new mayor, anybody, future mayor. That'd be great too. Let's move on.
Pressing onward, our last not even story, but as I speak, it is 9:03 p.m. on Thursday, May 30th, and our last headline tonight is Signy Dead. We have T-minus 20 hours until session. God bless us, everyone, is officially over. So the legislature adjourned last week. Governor Stitt has now acted upon all the bills that were at his desk. Yeah. He has either signed them or vetoed them or let them become law without his signature, as is his purview. So barring something cataclysmic, the legislature will sign die tomorrow at 5 p.m.
Indeed. Senator Hicks, how do you feel about that?
I was ready to go back in this week. I just thought I found it so fascinating that ultimately we adjourned at a week out from our actual Signy Die deadline. And so, I mean, I think we've all just kind of been glued to our email this week on seeing what the governor was vetoing and if that was going to necessitate a day of session at the Capitol. And, there were a couple of bills this week that I don't really understand.
The ballot selfies. Right? Didn't they pass? He signed the law. You can take ballot selfies now.
I did not know that. I was more concerned with the vetoes.
Apparently, it was illegal to take a selfie with your ballot.
I wanted to ask you about that. So I was
that's
listening
legal,
to
but current HIV curriculum.
Well,
we don't want that.
So this I was
priorities.
That is the question. That's the question I had. Like, so I was listening to another local political podcast earlier this week. And doing my homework.
Right.
And they brought up the fact that there was the bill on HIV education that's been in the works for several years. Republican sponsors and bill authors in both the House and the Senate passed with overwhelming bipartisan majorities in both houses, and the governor vetoed it. Was there ever any serious discussion about trying to override his veto on the floor?
I will say yes and no. I mean, as it relates to specific policy, no. But that's definitely why we left a week for the actual deadline, with the date pending. Because
so you could come back and override a veto on something that you wanted to.
But
absolutely.
Not about that bill.
This specific bill. There wasn't.
Right, correct.
Sure.
So the governor issued some vetoes. He did a line item veto as well. Do you know what that line was? Because I have since forgotten, Scott, either one of you.
Well, there was a line item veto on the budget. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
It's related to DHS's budget.
Oh, man. Of all the budgets. The one that we've had Federal Department of Justice intervention, that's the one we should definitely cut. In my opinion, that seems like maybe a poor use of the line item veto.
It was a DHS budget limit bill.
Okay. Yeah. There we go. They're both Googling feverishly. I should have researched this before I asked the question and put you on the spot. I apologize.
No. I mean, I think obviously I'm new in my capacity, but I guess people who've been there for the previous governor have basically all, had this kind of same reaction in that there's not been open lines of communication or what they felt like is transparency around the veto process. I joined the veto club a couple weeks ago.
Right. Yeah.
On a bill that was bipartisan and had bipartisan support in both chambers. And so my House author is a Republican from my hometown, and we worked together on this particular piece of legislation that related to education. And it was vetoed. And I mean, obviously, neither one of us had any prior warning that there were any concerns with this particular measure. And so I think that's new. And so I think everyone's just kind of trying to figure out, how the process is supposed to work, and if this is the way, the process will be moving forward. But it's really kind of frustrating to have worked on something for, months and for some authors years. And then, to have, one person basically reject the measure. I think that's, it's just frustrating, but, beyond that, it just begs the question of how are these decisions being made, and are there conversations that are being developed around those particular measures.
Right.
Do you know why it was vetoed?
I don't.
So did he not give a message? Because like for HIV, he gave us a message.
Right.
There was
a statement.
It wasn't an email. Basically there were many bills that were listed, and there was
one of them.
Yeah.
See, I will say, and I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago with the HIV bill. And I work in the HIV world, and I'm president of the board for the Oklahoma AIDS Care Fund, who's one of the organizations kind of pushing this. I'm also on the board for Generation Citizen, which this bill was born out of. So, like tag teaming this, he sent a veto memo about why he was vetoing it, and we got some solace out of that, I think, because it helped understand. And I think we talked about this, where in some ways I think he was basically trying to empower and require the Department of Health and Department of Education to go ahead and update the curriculum. And the perception that we've had is that they didn't feel like they could do that. And so in his veto message, we were like, oh, okay, well, this is maybe not entirely bad. But to hear that you didn't get that.
Yeah. And the current language on that particular statute, it's outdated.
1987.
And it's very offensive. So, this particular measure was repealing all of that outdated language and
just updating it,
the statute. So, again, I don't necessarily know that there have been open conversations and dialogue around why the specific policies that we are putting forth are necessary.
Right.
But it is concerning. Being, a senator and still not having clarity in kind of how those processes are happening. I feel very much left outside of that inner circle. And, that's, I just feel like it warrants a deeper discussion.
And I think that's unfortunate because this, he has been so clear about he's transparent, and that's been a big message.
And I know that there was the massive volume, right, of legislation, and even just trying to keep up with the daily work that, we were tasked to. And obviously, he's seeing the finalized product of all of that hard work and effort. So, I understand. I'm not trying to give an easy way out, but I just also feel like, when so many people have been involved, making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that we really feel like we're putting forth good measures to bring our state to that top 10 goal that he laid out for us. I just feel like there has to be more discussion and more dialogue around, yes, that is the third branch. It's all checks and balance. I get that, and we all work in tandem. But the legislative powers are given to the House and to the Senate.
Right. So, and part of our plan for this episode is to talk with you a little bit about just your experience. We'll talk with Cacky about some of the stuff she's involved with, and then we'll talk about the film maybe at the end. So
Great.
We're already in it. We'll just keep going. Cheers.
And we're back.
That's right. Yeah. No
next.
No musical interlude this time.
#, next segment.
That's right. We have music interludes, but we're already in it. So here we go. So Carri, do you think like some of that is that the governor is also new and trying to figure out, as someone who has not been involved in government, like this is a new world to him, and do you think that'll be different next year?
Yeah, I think that's my hope, is that, I mean, everybody's kind of in this transitional space right now. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think it keeps fresh eyes and fresh perspectives on a lot of, what could be kind of outdated practices. But I also know that, I mean, on his transition team and even on his cabinet, he has people that are well seasoned in his inner circle. And so, I think it has to be a balance, and, not being critical by any means. I mean, everybody is entitled to, run their business as they want to. And I mean, he's obviously, built this brand on, being a well-seasoned businessman. And so, if this is the new direction that the state is heading, I just hope that we're all open and receptive to, fine-tuning and doing our jobs as best as we possibly can.
Sure. So I'll be critical. Like with regard, like talking about like the HIV bill, the HIV education bill specifically, I've talked with some legislators about this, and like the words that were used to me is like, this is an example of like the governor not knowing what he doesn't know, right? Because he did, Andy, and we talked about this, like he issued that kind of like signing statement, for lack of a better word, like explaining like we don't need legislation to do this because the health department and the education department are already empowered to do this, but the health department has been asking the education department like to do this for years, and they haven't done it. Like
Decades.
that's the whole reason.
Right.
Like the reason that this bill came to fruition, at least in part, right, is to make them do the thing that they have the power to do and haven't done. And so it's like if you'd been involved in that process and like talked to people about the background and like met with the bill sponsors and kind of gone through this, you would see, okay. Yeah. It's not that like we need new law to give these agencies the power to do it. We need new law to direct them to do what they already have the authority to do.
I'm gonna take this one to the bill that I co-authored or was the Senate author on that was actually vetoed, related to education. And I mean, that was kind of the critique, I guess, amongst my colleagues, was that this particular piece of legislation was allowing for some more flexibility in giving kids excused absences. And so it was really born out of kind of a rural environment, in that kids who are in very small communities who play football and they play baseball and they wrestle. I mean, they do all the sports and athletics. By the time that spring rolls around, and they're also involved in ag, where they're, literally making money off of taking their animals to sell, that they aren't being allowed that opportunity because they're already at their maximum amount of excused absences from the schools. And so, this measure was ultimately, again, born out of that rural kind of mindset. But, as being someone who lives in an urban setting and has taught in Deer Creek most recently, we have a lot of kids that are involved on robotics teams, and getting that specific absence approved by the local schools can sometimes be difficult if it's not a school-sponsored activity. And so I really see this as allowing school districts to have more flexibility in making sure that, learning doesn't stop when we leave the classroom. There are really incredible opportunities that happen outside of the classroom every single day, and we should be celebrating the fact that our kids want to take part in robotics and STEM competitions. And so this piece of legislation was,
and raise pigs and cattle and
all of
right,
it, all of it, right, in tandem. And so I think the question was, well, can't school districts already do this? And the answer was definitely sure, but they're not. And so how do we balance what we know our constituencies are facing in trying to achieve this particular goal legislatively, but also, proactively in our communities with our local school boards and talking about these particular issues. And so, my House author was really disappointed because he had put a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears into this particular piece of legislation, and it's definitely relevant in his community. And so, we're not defeated. Ultimately, it's just a setback, and hopefully, the message there is that, if we want our local schools to be allowing our kids to have these enriched opportunities outside of the classrooms, then we really need to be advocating for them at that local school district level.
No, I think that, yes, preach, right? Like, I think that's like, it's frustrating to me as just someone who like watches from the outside and tries to like advocate. And so I can't imagine as someone who, you know, is authoring these bills. I don't think people who are not either involved in the process or who don't follow the process really closely, I don't know that sometimes we understand how much work it takes to get these things across the line, and that there are bills that like there are bills that were introduced this session and never got out of like the rules committee, right? That may get signed into law 4 or 6 years from now, and the process of them, like the process of those bills becoming law, takes that amount of time. It takes years of coalition building and like refining language and like building relationships and building like it, and to just like have all of that just go, you know, poof, like it's gone for like no reason that would I would probably be.
So let's talk about a good success that happened this session, though, because I did have one bill that went the distance, and as a freshman minority caucus member,
that's a big deal.
It's kind of exciting.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. So Senate Bill 1019 is a particular piece of legislation that provides for emergency access for life-saving medicines.
All right.
And my son has type 1 diabetes, so this is definitely near and dear to our family. An individual named Kevin lost his life in Ohio because his prescription had run out. He was also type 1 and couldn't get a renewal on his insulin over the New Year's holiday weekend, and so ultimately went into severe diabetic ketoacidosis and lost his life. And so this particular piece of legislation is modeled after a measure that they passed in Ohio. And I'm just excited that we were able to kind of tweak this to make it relevant to Oklahoma, in that, I mean, it's obviously exclusionary of any kind of narcotics, but there is a formulary board of physicians, of pharmacists that will decide, you know, what drugs, because, you know, being the forward thinker that I am, I'm like, I'm not putting a list of medicines into statute because I'm not a pharmacist and I'm not a doctor. I'm a consumer, and I want this to be a breathing, living document, so that as we have more science and we have more information available, it maintains its relevancy to really treat the need of individuals who manage a chronic illness on a day-to-day basis.
I think, and let me ask two things. One, I want to ask about diabetes and how you've been watching the developments over in Colorado, right? Because that's, I imagine, has potential implications for our state.
Yeah.
So if you respond to that and then come back, because I have a question about, or a comment perhaps about, putting things into statute that's unrelated. So
sure.
So you've been watching Colorado.
I have. And I mean, even more, I guess, broadly, I've been watching the congressional hearings on the insulin companies. And so Lankford actually came and addressed our Democratic caucus in the Senate this session, which was fantastic. And so I had some kind of, you know, one-on-one time to just pick his brain about the insulin hearings that are happening on Capitol Hill. And he basically kind of indicated that, you know, it's kind of a layer, and unfortunately it takes a lot of time to build the case around this particular measure. And so the background here is that insulin has, the cost of insulin has risen 1,200% since the time the patent was sold for $1 by an individual who, I mean, developed the drug that he always wanted it to be affordable and readily available for life-saving conditions. And here we are. So it's tripled in the time that my son has been diagnosed. So our cost out of pocket to purchase insulin just to keep our 4-year-old son alive has tripled in the last 2 years of his diagnosis.
And that's after insurance.
Correct.
Like, yeah.
Correct. And so, I mean, it's just, it's, I mean, literally out of control. And so in the first congressional hearing, I felt very frustrated. It felt like it was, you know, just a showboat. Nothing happened. And so Senator Lankford basically explained, you know, they're going to call in. I mean, it's kind of like being in the classroom. You call everybody in one by one, you know, and you build the background, you know, you build the story, and you try and figure out, and, you know, inevitably you call the manufacturers in, and they're going to, you know, point to the pharmacies, and you call the pharmacies in, and they're going to point to, you know, the drug companies. You call the drug, you know, everybody's pointing fingers everywhere. So, you know, who's really, who's really responsible? And I think this is what every consumer is asking, in that, I just know what it costs to keep my son alive, and I'm frustrated by the cost, and whoever's responsible needs to fess up, and we need to get this under control. So what happened in Colorado is that they put a cap ultimately on filling prescriptions at $100, which is still
high,
a lot of
right,
money.
Right.
It's still a lot of money, and so it's something. But what we've seen out of the congressional hearings is that two of the manufacturers, there's only three, which is part of the problem, there are no generics available of insulin whatsoever. And so insurance companies have even gotten really smart at that. They will only pay for generic medicines. And so I'm in like a play group, support group of parents. And so two of my friends now who have similar insurance plans they have no coverage whatsoever because there's no generic drug available for insulin. And so they literally have to pay list price every single time they go to refill their kids. I know. Anyways, again. Especially
because insulin's been around for decades. Like, this isn't a brand new fancy thing.
Right. And so, I'm encouraged by what's happening in Colorado. I'm encouraged by what's happening on Capitol Hill, in that two of those manufacturers have already basically cut their price in half. The newest information is at $120 per vial. But what is important to keep in mind, we pay basically $300 per vial of insulin in America, and bringing it down to $140, I guess, is still $120 above what the rest of the world pays, in that most other countries pay $20 per vial. So we're subsidizing the cost of the world's market.
Right.
And they're cutting it in half. That's, on the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, though, that also almost pisses you off even more, because it's you can do that. Right. You've just been getting rich off of the disease that my child was born with.
And even we had that conversation with HIV meds, where Kaletra, which has been around for a long time, and it's not quite generic, but it was what Magic Johnson was on when it first came out and all that stuff. Here in the U.S., it's $600 or something a month. And in Kenya, it's $8. And I was like, hang on. And I get that on the whole, Americans have more money than Kenyans, probably, right? But that's a big difference, and not okay. Yeah. So, thank you for responding to that.
Well, sure. And I think it also just kind of brings to light the question of how much is too much, if you could cut your list price in half and not even bat an eye, why is healthcare treated like a capitalist commodity?
Right.
We know that individuals who have factors outside of their control are literally, their entire life savings, their entire life earnings will be just invested in keeping themselves alive.
It's crazy.
I think we can do better than that as Americans. I think we can do better than that in Oklahoma. And so, I'm working with Representative Bennett. We actually introduced that piece of legislation that Colorado just passed. It didn't go anywhere.
There's always next year.
But it's still, it's been introduced. And so hopefully we can now start to track what's happening in Colorado. They've done a lot of really great things with transparency. And so I have some really good working relationships with state representatives and state senators that are serving inside of Colorado that I just find very uplifting because they are, miles ahead of where I feel like we should be. But I'm also optimistic because I hope that we can follow in their path.
Sure. Right on.
So I think maybe we want to shift gears a little bit to education.
Well, yes. Almost. First, I want to talk to Cacky a little bit about, do you want to do activism and Moms Demand Action first, or do you want to do movie first? I'll let you choose.
I don't care.
We can do either. We can do either one. Well, that's where I was going. Was education was because that was the.
That's right. Well,
that's my documentary.
It's a little bit of both.
That's what.
See, but I do want to say, because I was in the committee hearing when Senator Hicks proposed that there be additional training for teachers, free.
Oh, yes.
Completely free epilepsy training to learn how to deal with a child that was having a seizure. And it was shot down
Yeah,
I will always remember that.
Yeah, it was tied 7-7. But I mean, I don't know. I've heard it said that common sense legislation is the hardest kind of legislation to pass because people assume that it's already happening. But obviously, if you're proposing a legislative change, it's not.
But that does not apply to this because people asked you specifically, how much will it cost? And you were very clear, $0. It will cost nothing. Anyways, it should have passed. I hope it'll pass next session.
Yeah. We'll work on it.
Great.
Well, that's a good segue then. Cacky, you spent more time at the Capitol this year than you have in the past.
Quite a bit.
Right? But
yes.
That's been a big shift for you.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely.
And so, one of the things that Let's Fix This cares about is getting people involved. And I don't want to take all the credit, but I feel like we had an influence on that happening for you.
That's what he says when he wants to take all the credit.
Senator.
Not all. So right. That's true. That's true.
Yes. Actually, I am very well represented right now, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Cacky's my constituent, just for
yes,
full disclosure.
Right on. This is advocacy in action right
That's
here.
Right.
Holding her accountable. So you have been involved with Moms Demand Action, among
correct.
other things this year. Tell us a little bit about what your experience has been like being involved this year at the Capitol, and how often did you go? What was your experience like overall? Did it meet your expectations?
So I really got involved with the Moms Demand Action after Parkland, right? I mean, because, and the fact that Florida has loosened restrictions on guns is shocking to me and very, very upsetting. Because to me, those students have really led a huge groundswell of activism against, firearms, right? Right. So I am a Moms Demand Action volunteer. And so in particular this year, there was the permitless carry. So I was there a lot for that. That
was early on in session too.
That was the first
weeks,
bill
right?
he signed.
Yeah.
Yes, which is what I will always think about. Our dear governor. But then there was another bill that did sort of die, which was to loosen restrictions of carrying guns in schools. Because, according to state law, employees can already carry guns, but you have to have the cleat training. And it was going to slash that to only 8 hours. And that was, Kim David kept saying over and over and over about how horrible the training was. It was so worthless. And so that worthless training was what we were going to have teachers go through, which that's unacceptable.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's also the training that law enforcement officers go through.
No, it's much, much more.
Yeah. The cleat training is what law enforcement goes through, which is the current statute in that anyone, the local school board can allow or authorize any individuals to carry with the cleat training. But this particular measure that she's saying is Senator David was talking about how the license to open carry or conceal and carry, that training was not necessarily up to par. And so instead of, increasing the rigor on that particular training, we just did away with it.
Right.
But
you don't need to mandate training, Senator, because anybody who is a responsible gun owner is going to get the training anyway.
I am a responsible gun owner, and I do enjoy guns. I mean, I am. But I think what's really frustrating in that light is that I am a responsible gun owner who is licensed and trained for my weapon, and so is my husband. And so to think that the answer to our current situation is to have less responsible gun owners is, in my personal opinion, the absolute opposite direction of what I would see as
completely nonsensical.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how often did you go to the Capitol this year?
That's a good question. I don't know.
You can come check my yearbook. She signed it every time.
I would wander the halls and sign books. I was here. Thank you for supporting gun sense legislation.
Well, I felt like I would either see you up there or get a text from you, like looking for someone's office or something.
That's right.
Yeah. And so, but that was a big shift for you, right? Because in years past, you might have been on occasion, but not on a regular basis.
That's correct.
And so this year, certainly the Capitol was a different vibe, I think, than in my experience, which is somewhat limited, but the last few years. There was certainly a different vibe up there. Even when we were there for Child Advocacy Day earlier this month, I was there setting up, and like the governor was out there talking to people, and and you almost never saw Governor Fallon just in the rotunda hanging out. And he came out and he's like, oh, hey, and was talking to Jennifer Monies, who he had nominated for the Board of Education, and kind of all that. That's a whole other topic for you, Carrie. But it was just like one of those things where I was like, well, this is different. And you could, I think, from talking to legislators that had been there for even 2 years, were like, no, it's all different, good and bad, right, in different ways. And so for you, for someone who hadn't been there that much, what, I don't know how to ask, but like, what was the vibe or the general sentiment that you felt when you were up there this year in general?
Well, okay, so something that you guys said on your podcast is that you had, I feel like maybe...
This is accountability and transparency in action.
We said something?
Yeah, not to bring it home to this building, but I was like, because it was a huge freshman class, right? Like it was a turnover. It was a lot of, fresh eyes, if you will. But it also seemed to be going back to those hot topics of guns and
abortion.
I will say reproductive health. Okay. Yes.
Did we talk about that?
Did we talk about that?
We did. Like the first 2 weeks. We got that. It was funny that we were like, everything's different except for all the laws. And so
everything is so much more moderate except the votes.
Well, and the thing that was really different was new people, and that we weren't having to cut budgets this year. But
correct.
Everything else was fairly typical, and
you don't have to cut budgets when you have plenty of money.
Right.
Well, but I think that's been a feather in a cap of our new governor, is that he had this great budget, but he had more money.
Right. Yeah, he came at a good time.
Well, and I mean, he's been on the record as basically saying that he would have vetoed 1010XX, which is, I mean, completely how and why we have any surplus whatsoever. So it's important that we continue to make it about the issues, in that, I mean, if it weren't for 1010XX, we would not be in this financial state right now.
And what's funny is that, so let's say, to rewind, if last year Governor Fallon had vetoed 1010XX, it takes a lower threshold to override a veto than it does to pass the bill in the first place, right? It takes a 3/4 to pass the revenue thing, but only 2/3 to
That's correct.
undo the revenue. That's funny, or undo the veto. And so they passed it once. They could have overridden the veto with less votes than it took to pass the bill in the first place, which I guess is reason to not veto something. However,
that's really interesting, because I wonder if that would have gone to. That's interesting.
Dun, dun, dun. So Andy has a good idea, or observation.
No, but those are both constitutional provisions, right?
Yes.
So then it would have gone to the Supreme Court, I would guess, right? To say
it's separate things.
Right, but then they would say, but then you could challenge it and say, no, you need 75 to That's really interesting.
I think they would have just. They might not have overridden the veto then, because that's a statement. But let's say that happened. She vetoed it and it didn't get overridden and it didn't get passed. We didn't get a teacher pay raise. We didn't raise taxes and all these things. Governor Stitt would have come in a very different spot. It would have been a whole different conversation.
Governor Stitt might not have come in.
That's possible,
right? Like if all that happens,
but unlikely. I don't know. I mean, I think they still would have seen him as fresh eyes and a different person, as opposed to Drew Edmondson, who was a known.
I mean, maybe I'm
entity.
just saying. I think if she vetoes 1010XX and then we're still in this quagmire of a budget last year, I don't think we can predict with any kind of certainty what the outcome of the election would have been.
Maybe we can't predict. That's why we're discussing it.
Right, but I'm saying,
hypothetical.
Right, but I'm saying anyway,
that's a whole other episode.
Yeah. Let's just be happy that it passed,
right,
and was signed.
And hey, who's a teacher? Let's all put our happy face on.
I think it really did. I mean, it set the tone for this new administration. It set the tone for the largest freshman class that we've ever had in the history of our state,
for sure.
And so, I think that in and of itself, though, is also telling. In that, most of us who are serving in this new class don't remember a time where we were slashing budgets just to keep things level and equal.
Right.
So
that's interesting.
I do also love that you just played the role of every teacher that I've ever had. Okay, Scott, totally. That's an interesting question, but it's time to move on.
So sorry.
And on that note,
Always a teacher, even if I'm a senator now.
I love it. I love it.
Can't abandon him. Sorry.
Well, that's a good point of transition as well. So
now we can talk about education.
yeah, we can go for it. Let's talk about a movie.
Yeah, we've got a world premiere happening next week. Cacky, tell us about the movie.
It is called Faces of the 47th, The Art of Activism. It premieres on Thursday, June 6th at Harkins. It's part of the deadCenter Film Festival. And I love deadCenter. I was the previous executive director before Lance. I'm a film icon. I mean, kind of a badass.
Cacky has an IMDb page.
Yes, I do.
I've seen that. I don't have an IMDb page.
# goals.
Right, yeah, something. I want to be in something. But let's fix this film. Let's film this. Ooh, make it happen.
I'll pass your name along to Spencer Hicks.
There we go. Does he have an IMDb?
Yes, he does. He's been in films. I've been to his premiere.
Yeah, he had a premiere 2 years ago.
Yes.
He acted opposite of Lance McDaniel, and I felt like it was a great film.
It was. It was very, very funny.
Yeah.
Dang.
Anyways.
I'm left out. All right. Well,
so Faces of the 47th.
Yes.
What's it about?
My film.
Let's go back to me.
Yes.
What's the movie about?
So it is a documentary feature, and in particular, it is the ripple effect, really, of the teacher walkout from last year. A friend of mine, Sarah Agee, who is a mom. She's a mom in Norman. She has 3 kids in the public school system. She, after the teacher walked out, wanted to do something else. And so she was aware of a global art project called the Inside Out Project. She contacted them to say, I want to do something to keep the conversation going. And they said, yes, this is a perfect fit. And so what her idea was is she took portraits of 47 public school kids, and that was to represent how we are 47th in the nation for overall funding for public education. And the portraits were installed in Norman, Oklahoma City, Winoka, and Pauls Valley. And it was really just to keep the conversation going. It was to encourage people to vote pro-education, to keep politicians accountable, and also to encourage people to vote. And I like to think it was very effective because it was one of the highest voter turnouts of midterms. Midtowns, all that.
Also.
All of it. Anyways, but highest voter turnout for midterm. There. Mm-hmm. Midterm elections in 22 years.
We also can call it the tweener. Tweener elections?
Nobody calls it that.
I've never heard of that.
It's the tweener election.
Inappropriate.
Did you just make that up?
No, people say it. It's in between. It's a tweener.
No.
Between presidential elections.
It's a hard no.
Veto from the senator.
Yeah,
Sorry, Scott.
The senator said you made that up.
Your point is not well taken.
Oh yes, very good.
Not the first time I've gotten sad trombone. Won't be the last.
Oh man, that's super exciting. So my wife and I are going to deadCenter this year, as I mentioned earlier, and
fantastic.
And I said I think we gotta because it's showing on Thursday and then on
Sunday at 11:15 at Harkins. Yes.
And so I was like, I think we got to go on Thursday because I want to be there for the
opening night.
For the opening night, right? Yeah, that's a big deal. Very exciting. Is there anyone we know in that film?
Well, yes, right across over here, Senator Carri Hicks is in it.
Hey, look, are you going to have an IMDb page? You're just trying to keep up with Spencer now.
Oh,
right?
yeah. You know what? I need to put it on IMDb.
Yeah,
you will
I need
be on
to keep
there.
up.
That's right. But it's actually very exciting because she was. When we filmed it, she was a candidate.
Right.
Campaigning.
Yes.
And it had rained that morning. So when she contacted me to come to the installation, I was wearing a raincoat.
That's right.
Probably, I haven't seen the film yet, but I will
it's
be
fantastic.
Very, very critical, I'm sure.
No, you look fantastic.
But no, it was exciting, obviously, to be in the middle of the campaign. And I was out door knocking and had a volunteer that was driving me. And so we came and were interviewed for the documentary and got to see the art installation. And obviously what I know of public schools in Oklahoma are that in spite of a lack of funding and in spite of resources, our kids continue to be, to me, our greatest asset moving forward. And so to make the dollars follow where our dedication should be, as a mom and now as a state senator, I hope to continue the conversation, as Cacky has mentioned, and making sure that we continue to hold one another accountable, because it really is an investment for the future. What do we want for our future generations in the state of Oklahoma? I want a well-educated populace who is, able-bodied and ready to go to work in whatever capacity they desire.
Yeah, excellent. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know how we're doing on time, but I don't know if there's a better place to leave, to leave it.
That's about it. I was going to ask Cacky. So I just Googled facesofthe47th.com.
Yes.
It's the website about the film, right?
Well, yes. I mean, so that is yes. So that is really about the art installation, but yes, that is what we're using for the film, because really the film is about the art installation.
Okay, so that's really about like Sarah Agee and that whole thing.
Correct.
Because there are some other people here from our state that are in the film, right?
Yes, that's correct. Our lovely Mayor David Holt, because he was actually a senator.
Right.
He cast one of the votes for the teacher pay raise. Congresswoman Kendra Horn, and she too was running. And so it's, of the two female candidates that were running, and they ran on, both essentially on education platform, it's fantastic they both won. And I think they're both serving our state very, very well.
Excellent. That sounds great.
Cannot wait to see it. Where will you be able to see it after it premieres at deadCenter? Is that a known thing yet?
Not yet. Hey, man, we're just trying to get the world premiere.
So Netflix, if you're listening, we have.
It's like, if you don't have deadCenter tickets, how can you see the film?
Well, it will appear again, but right now, deadCenter. June 6th and June 9th.
So y'all go to deadCenter.
That's right. deadcenterfilm.org.
Ride the streetcar and win some tickets.
There you go.
And then give me one.
Cacky, how can people find you on social media?
Well, on Twitter, I'm Cackiness. On Facebook, I'm Cacky Poarch.
There we go. That works.
No,
the people can just figure it out. Senator Hicks, how about you?
I'm on Twitter at Hicks4OK, and Instagram at the same handle, and you can find me at Senator Carri Hicks on Facebook.
Super. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. Scott is at SC Melson. I'm at Andy OKC. The whole shebang is at Let's Fix This OK on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tell your friends about our podcast. Tune in next week. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show on Apple iTunes. We also just added this to radio.com today. Scott, I didn't tell you that.
Ooh.
We're on radio.com now.
Fancy.
Well, we will be with this episode. I guess that people listen to that.
We should get on Luminary.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
It may be out there. Oh, you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
We are not a luminary. Sorry, folks. If you'd like to support the podcast, please go to letsfixthisok.org/donate. You can actually sponsor an episode if you'd like. Go to our store. There's a way to sponsor it right there. It's only $50. And you can get connected with some of Oklahoma's most passion-involved, just regular people, right? Like citizens who actually care. That would be tremendous. We'd love to have you on. Over the course of the summer, Scott and I are going to be doing some series about healthcare, about education, about independent redistricting,
criminal justice
reform.
And we're may take a little road trip.
We might do a road trip up to Grand Lake.
Might take a couple of road trips.
That's right.
And are you going to use anyone's sound equipment?
We might use your sound equipment.
Oh.
All right. Well, that's the end. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.